right, it started when the economy crashed. 2007, 2008, the bottom came out. Everything went wrong. People lost jobs. Jobs lost money. It seems like everybody went through suffering. Even the rich folks were dealing with some level of suffering. Of course, they could still buy a sandwich, but it wasn't feeling good, even to those who had much. We went through something. You know, it hit everybody, even people who were blabbing and grabbing and believing and receiving. All of a sudden, the prosperity message took on a different level because people were trying to figure out, well, what's going on? Where's God? Why am I going through this? And it was a rough thing. So here's our topic for today. Why did I have to go through what I went through? Why did I have to go through what I went through? I mean, it really didn't make sense because of a philosophy of theology, not because of biblical theology. Had we looked at the Word of God, we would have seen it very plain. It was real simple. One of the prize verses to help us explain it is Deuteronomy chapter number 8. So I want to ask you to take Deuteronomy chapter 8 for our first part of our discussion today, and let's talk about it. And read the whole chapter and tell me, why do people go through? Why would God allow people to go through what they go through? That's one of our questions. The second one is going to go something like that. It's like this. You've heard it before. How can bad things happen to good people? I'll be right back. Fascinating, wasn't it? I mean, that's interesting. That when you think about it, we kind of expect that God is like a genie. You know, let me just do the right things, rub the lamp, and you give me what I want. And he doesn't operate like that. He's our king. He doesn't serve us. We serve him. And in our service, he's doing something kind of strange. He's developing us into character. He's developing us into men and women of God. Wow. So there in chapter 8, which we've looked at already, there are three things that he says he's accomplishing in our lives. And sometimes the tough things in life are meant to guide us to these three things, to accomplish these three things in our life. Let's take a look at what they are. They're all three in verse 2. So we'll look at verse 2 especially, but also 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and 8, but especially verse 2. Let's take and find those three things and talk about what each one of those three mean in you. I'll be right back. Now here's the last part for today. In chapter 8 and verses 4 and 5 in particular, let's start with just reading those verses and take a look at it. God explains. The wonderful thing about him is that he's not just a brute that tosses us around and puts us through stuff, but he actually took the time to explain why he does what he does. And everybody needs to know that. And somebody says, well, he didn't explain to me why I went through what I went through. Well, yeah, he did. You just didn't read it. Now, if you read the book of Hebrews in the New Testament, chapter 4, you find out that many people who were going through this in Deuteronomy 8 had the same problem. God was saying, here's why I'm doing this, and they weren't listening. They didn't want to hear his word. So they went through it, in many cases, in vain. It really didn't do them any good. The worst thing you can do is go through without going to. That is, to groan without gain. That doesn't make sense. I mean, if you're going to go through it and God's in control, I want to know what you're saying, God. So let's take verses 4 and 5 of chapter 8, and let's look at some of the things God does in explaining to us what it is that he was doing in us. And then before you finish, after you've done that, I want you to skip all the way down to chapter number 8, verse 11, and see some of the warnings that God gives us, and then look at verse number 18, the third part, verse 18, and see the promises of God for you because you've been through. Don't forget that last part. Got to get that. God bless.